The third and final season of Squid Game was released recently to surprisingly little fanfare, given how huge the first season was when it came out in 2021. It's still Netflix's most watched season of all time at the time of making this video. Granted, the second season was a bit underwhelming, but season 3 feels nothing close to the cultural saturation that the first season achieved. It was truly inescapable. Everyone was watching it, even kids, it seems, which is questionable given, all the violent death. You probably didn't watch that first season immediately, but you might have soon caved after hearing about it constantly and feeling sick of being out the loop. Well, I did anyway. There were parodies, memes, Halloween costumes, and real-life Squid Games, without all the violence. The popularity of Season 1 was something rare, a truly shared cultural experience. Of course, there's semi-regular TV shows, movies, and artists with relatively broad popularity, but this feels narrow and rarer than it used to be. The cultural products we consume are increasingly niche, more closely aligned with our own personal preferences and interests. Many of us are into hyper-specific subgenres, and maybe we just listen to one artist that perfectly resonates with us. YouTube has millions of channels available, and we watch a tiny sliver that scratches our itches perfectly, like small channels that make videos about niche internet topics. We hyper-optimize our entertainment and information to suit us, to maximize pleasure and maximize comfort, avoiding challenging ourselves or our worldview too much. But while this might be nice and help us get through life in this increasingly turbulent world, what is it doing to us when our cultural experiences are no longer shared? What does this mean for our ability to coexist? This is The Internet is Eating Itself, and let's get into it. It's difficult to do a one-to-one comparison of life pre-social media because our lives are so different in so many ways. While the 20th century saw a decrease in time spent working by adults and children alike, the maximum 40-hour workweek and 2-day weekend wasn't mandated in the US until 1940. For this reason, in the early 20th century at least, your average worker was clocked in longer than they are now. Compounded by domestic tasks taking longer and a higher proportion of Westerners working in agriculture or factories, there was simply less leisure time. But the leisure time people did have was generally spent together, more often than not with people enjoying games, local theatre, pubs, and even storytelling. And this would include cinemas or movie theatres, with the first permanent one opening in 1896 in New Orleans, Louisiana. Early films were short and silent, accompanied by music, followed by films with audible dialogue, talkies. Cinemas were decorated ornately, inspired by European opera houses, giving a sense of occasion to visits. Despite this, they were priced affordably, creating a communal social experience. With the arrival of newsreels in the 1910s, they would also become a source of information, not just entertainment. While the golden age of cinema, spanning from the 1910s to the 1960s, would produce masterpieces that are still lauded today, admissions would eventually decline. As Michelle C. Ports describes, the single most profound cause, according to many sources, of the decline in cinema attendance was the birth of a comparatively small device called a television set. And it would have happened sooner too, but World War II delayed its release for commercial use and greatly inhibited it from spreading quickly. With that being said, the beginning of the decline of cinema was preceded by the arrival of TV. Initially starting with urban sprawl and suburbanisation, since most cinemas were in urban areas, and only later fueled by the rise of television. To give some context behind this suburbanisation process, following World War II, many Western countries experienced a housing boom as they sought to rebuild devastated areas and accommodate returning soldiers, as well as the ensuing baby boom. Much of this housing development took the form of suburbanisation, building on the outskirts of cities. This was further fueled by white flight, the migration of white people from racially diverse urban areas, and the increasingly widespread ownership of cars, particularly in the US. These idyllic single-family homes became a sign of middle-class prosperity in the US, the white picket fence, and the freedom from living in close quarters with those outside your family unit. These homes were physically spread out from one another, albeit less so outside the US, with the semi-detached being more typical in the horizontally challenged UK, for example. Gated communities and HOAs would create a further sense of separation from clusters of homes and their immediate surroundings. Shared experiences persisted, of course. People didn't stop going to school or work or community events, and people still did go to the cinema, albeit less frequently. But this nonetheless represented a step back in the shared experience of entertainment, with media consumption increasingly focused around TV. The first televised events took place in the 1930s, such as the 1936 Summer Olympics, the coronation of King George VI, and the 1939 New York World's Fair. In the US, the 1947 Baseball World Series is specifically pinpointed as creating a surge in the sale of TV sets, with the link between sports and TV persisting even today. In their early days, before there were TVs in every room, it was common to visit friends and families' houses to watch special broadcasts, such as the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II or the first televised presidential debate. The shared experience persisted, albeit on a smaller scale. It wasn't long before everyone had their own TV though. Before 1947, only a few thousand American homes owned television sets. Just 5 years later, that number had jumped to 12 million. By 1955, half of American homes had a TV set. By 1964, that figure had climbed to 93%. While that's not to say it stopped entirely, big events like the World Cup and the Super Bowl still bring people together today, there was no longer the same need to come together to watch events on TV. TVs multiplied inside homes as well, inside kitchens and bedrooms, but it's safe to say that most TV viewing took the form of a family around one screen. The shared experience remained intact. While the first golden age of TV between 1947 and 1960 featured long drama series that received critical acclaim, the 70s saw an explosion in shows designed to cater to this dynamic of the whole family watching TV together, specifically sitcoms, in what Pace magazine calls a golden age of the genre. While these shows were on the receiving end of criticism at the time, namely for being out of touch with contemporary political upheaval, they nonetheless served as a shared experience both within households and in broader society, in large part because of the more limited selection available on TV at the time. Weekly broadcasting also built excitement in audiences and facilitated discussion the following day between school kids, co-workers, and neighbors. With the arrival of cable television came an explosion in channels, beyond just ABC, NBC, and CBS in the US, and BBC and ITV in the UK. Viewers had choice like they'd never had before, but this would pale in comparison to what was to come. What started with a quote-unquote family computer on dial-up internet transformed into multiple computers and laptops in family homes, and then a computer in every pocket, and then a computer in every TV. Smart TVs. Netflix, a DVD-by-mail company at the time, would launch its own streaming service, allowing users to watch whatever they wanted without being confined to a schedule, something that felt revolutionary. While it had a modest selection at first, they soon secured key titles like Breaking Bad and a deal with Disney, outmaneuvering legacy film and TV studios. By 2011, it had already become the source of 30% of North American streaming traffic during peak hours, the largest of any source. A couple of years later, they released their first titles produced in-house, such as Orange is the New Black and House of Cards. I probably don't need to go into too much detail about what Netflix achieved in the years since, but by 2016, it was producing more original series and films than any network or cable channel, 126 in total. By 2021, it was pulling in more Academy Award nominations than any other studio, many of whom were launching their own streaming services, desperately attempting to catch up. They dumped their back catalogues on these services and began pumping out originals too. We had officially reached peak TV. The sheer volume of TV on offer was massive, as streaming services fought tooth and nail for every inch of territory. In the space of half a century, we'd gone from having just a few channels and watching whatever happened to be on at the time, to having thousands of TV shows on demand, much of it released in the last few years. You could find numerous shows and films that perfectly suited your interests with relative ease. Studios, however, were quickly jolted back to reality as the need to balance budgets reared its head, with many TV shows being cancelled as a result. RIP on becoming a god in Central Florida, you were too good for this world. But even now, there's such a glut of content, we really are spoilt for choice. The chances of you watching the same show as your friends or co-workers are now relatively slim. If a friend tells you that you'd love a show, you'll probably say you'll put that on the list and never actually watch it, because you already know what works for you. You know what makes you laugh, cry, what you find cringe. We can be so finicky about what we like in a TV show, we'll often give up after the first episode if we don't like it for whatever arbitrary reason, and it's so hard to keep up with everyone's recommendations anyway. While there are shows that we all seem to watch, like Squid Game, Stranger Things, and Game of Thrones, these only seem to happen every few years now, if that. Even recent shows that can feel extremely popular, like Severance, don't achieve the same level of widespread viewership that was once common. But TV shows aren't just competing with each other. They're now competing with user-generated content too, such as YouTube. It's now the biggest streaming service as a percentage of viewing, and is eclipsed as a percentage of overall TV viewing only by broadcast and cable TV. In fact, there's even talk of it becoming the new TV, which it basically already is for younger generations. YouTube has two key advantages here, the volume of content and its algorithm, both of which contribute to the hyper-personalisation of information and entertainment. As discussed, there's a ton of TV available to stream now, but this pales in comparison to the over 20 billion videos on YouTube, with 20 million uploaded every day. Contrasting with TV, which is spread across numerous streaming services, the cost of which can quickly add up, YouTube is an ocean of content, featuring big and small channels across every niche you can think of, and ones you'd never think you'd be interested in. But this would all be near useless without an algorithm showing you the videos you'll actually watch. In the early days of the platform, discovery was primitive and limited to the most popular videos and the search bar. Since then, recommendations have become the primary means of finding content to watch, even from accounts you're already subscribed to. The vast majority of views that creators get on their videos are from people who aren't subscribed to them. This isn't a criticism as such, but you'll often see channels do this little "only X% of you are subscribed" screenshot, which, I hate to say it, is kind of meaningless. If you're getting any kind of scale, it's always going to be a small percentage of your viewers that are actually subscribed, and that's fine. I do appreciate you subscribing though, as it means you're more likely to see me pop up in your recommendations and helps promote the video by sending a positive signal to YouTube to boost it to other viewers. This reduced emphasis on subscriptions does annoy people who would rather just see the channels they're subscribed to first, but Google has clearly established that it keeps people on the platform longer and makes them more money. On average, at least. This has been the driving force behind the pervasiveness of algorithmic feeds across practically all social media platforms. Of course, ones without algorithms and pick-your-own ones do exist, such as Mastodon and Blue Sky, which I covered in my Death of the Algorithm video. But these represent a tiny fraction of all social media activity, and given the recent drop in Blue Sky users, it's beginning to look like most people would prefer apps with a For You page of some form. This is because we've become accustomed to highly relevant feeds. Especially if we've used addictive apps like TikTok, where the algorithm is just so good at showing us content we like. While our tolerance for irrelevant content might be low, TikTok balances this perfectly with an element of exploration that helps us discover interesting niches we weren't even aware of, never pushing stuff we don't like too much. There's even research supporting this, with a 2024 study finding that TikTok's algorithm exploits real users' interests in between 30 and 50% of all recommended videos in the first 1,000 videos of the user's tenure on TikTok. Like YouTube, TikTok has been able to achieve success through the sheer volume of content available. There'll always be something relevant to you, no matter how niche your interests. A quirk of TikTok is that it's easy to misjudge how broadly popular something is, thinking a trend or a meme is bigger than it actually is because it's all over your feed. Meanwhile, the vast majority of social media users have never heard of this thing that's huge in your world, and you only find out how niche it is when you try and talk to others about it. The threshold for something to break through to the mainstream is very high due to the sheer volume of content that's competing for everyone's attention. Conversely, this strengthens the feeling of kinship when you meet someone who does happen to be into the same show or musician or creator that you love. And there's a plethora of online communities that have formed around these kind of niche shared interests, which people talk about with passion, whether that be anime or woodworking or baking or buses or even fire alarms. There's niches within niches as people obsess over increasingly specialized interests, generating a frequency and intensity of discussion that's rarely seen anywhere in the real world. Developments are discussed, drama unfolds, and arguments are had at length. Communities ultimately splinter and fiercely distance themselves from one another. This is one of the great things about the internet, whether it's happening in subreddits or Tumblrs or Discord servers or even Facebook groups, but they can simultaneously become unwelcoming, as those passionate about their obsession have little patience for newcomers or those who aren't quite as serious as themselves. These communities become insular and cliquey. Reddit and Discord moderators epitomize this, having become a notorious stereotype in recent years, associated with minimal showering and maximum condescension. Even these spaces that should be a bastion of the shared experience become self-serving and centered around exclusivity. It's difficult to understand all this as anything other than us becoming more individualistic, more me, and only interested in that which exactly suits our own very specific interests. The product of increasingly inhabiting a digital world where everything is catered to us. Apps play into our worst instincts as humans to maximize our attention and maximize the ad revenue they drive. And this all inhibits our ability to see others' perspectives, as we potentially consume entirely different information from any given person. We end up with main character syndrome, believing that our priorities supersede all others. We expect everything to be tailored to us and have a hard time accepting anything that isn't. This is maybe best exemplified by bean soup theory, a phrase originating from a phenomenon of internet commenters asking for changes to recipes they see online. The bean soup in question was made by TikToker Vibing Granola Mom, whose recipe attracted the all too common deluge of comments asking for alterations to suit their specific needs, and yes, even substitutes for beans. Why would you want to substitute beans? While the original creator was remarkably patient in response to this, it drew an incredulous, frustrated response from another TikToker, Sarah the Book Fairy, who used it to make a broader point about self-centeredness and individualism. What the bean soup symbolized was almost a complete collapse of the shared experience, an inability to understand that not every piece of media must be catered to you specifically. But let me end this video on a positive note. Now, I was never really into football or soccer growing up. I disliked it for the longest time. Nothing inherent to the game, but the violence, the racism, the general toxicity that often came along with it. I couldn't bring myself to care about a particular team, and I still can't. But I have come to appreciate it more because of what it means to so many people in my country and even around the world. You can substitute football for American football or baseball if you're American, or maybe ice hockey in Canada, by the way. Sports feels like the last bastion of shared experiences. While the audiences tend to be male-dominated, there's diversity within this, as people of all nationalities and ethnicities, ages and classes sit next to each other. It's a rare context in which the rich rub shoulders with the not-so-rich. It means a lot to people too. If their personal life is a mess, they still feel part of a team. And there's playful rivalry between those teams too, even if it's not too playful at times. In the rare instance that England does well in an international tournament, there's palpable excitement. You can hear people celebrating in their homes when they score a goal, beer goes fucking everywhere in pubs. You might call this patriotism, and it certainly plays a role, but people really latch onto this shared experience, and it feels like it means more every time. The rare time when there's a real sense of connectedness with strangers. But what do you think? Am I underestimating the strength of shared experience in 2025? Does it simply manifest in ways I haven't accounted for? Or am I mourning for a world that never actually existed? Let me know down in the comments and hit those like and subscribe buttons while you're down there, it really helps me out. I release a new video every couple of weeks, so until next time, see ya.